Jacob read the room quickly and decisively. Time to return to the land of promise. God had transferred a large portion of the increases in Laban's flock over to Jacob. Jacob has the complete backing of his wives, who are greatly aggrieved at their father's treatment of them. Jacob was effectively a prisoner to Laban's tyranny. Unbeknown to Jacob, Rachel steals the household idols. So here we have Laban, murder in his eyes, chest puffed out, his men menacingly gathered, boasting of his power to harm. Everyone knew Jacob had justifiable reason for doing what he did. Jacob now sees the deflation of Laban. Jacob had publicly and comprehensively exposed the unrighteousness of Laban. These are my daughters and my grandchildren and my flocks. Jacob has no need to reply back to Laban. Jacob and his sons gather stones, setting it up as a pillar. Sad old Laban rises, kisses his daughters and grandchildren, departs, and never sees any of them ever again. Genesis 31 verse 1. Now Jacob heard the words of Laban's son, saying, Jacob has taken away all that was our father's, and from what was our father's he has acquired all this wealth. And Jacob saw the countenance of Laban, and indeed it was not favourable toward him as before. Then the Lord said to Jacob, Return to the land of your fathers and your family, and I will be with you. Jacob read the room quickly and decisively. His metaphorical spidey senses were tingling. He started hearing murmurings from Laban's sons and noticed the change of atmospherics when he interacted with Laban. The ultimate poker face, Laban, could no longer hide his disdain for Jacob. Laban no longer was thankful for the reflected blessings he received from Jacob's presence. He started to get jealous of Jacob's growing wealth, even if his wealth had also prospered since Jacob's arrival. The moment you feel a tinge of jealousy, this is the moment you know you've stepped outside the will of God. At this time, God spoke directly to Jacob. Time to return to the land of promise. Time to get away from Laban. 20 years Jacob had spent in the land of Padan Aram. Jacob is now 97 years of age, and he's heading home. His degree certificate, with honours in duplicity, in his back pocket from Laban's University of Hard Knocks. Verse 4. So Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field, to his flocks. And he said to them, I see your father's countenance, that it is not favourable towards me as before. But the God of my father has been with me. And you know that with all my might I have served your father. Yet your father has deceived me, and changed my wages 10 times. But God did not allow him to hurt me. If he said thus, the speckled shall be your wages, then all the flocks bore speckled. And if he said thus, the streaked shall be your wages, then all the flocks bore streaked. So God has taken away the livestock of your father and given them to me. We get some of the backstory of the last 6 years in this mention of 10 changes in Laban's salary incentive scheme. Though there's little evidence in the text of Jacob being a spiritual man, a man of prayer. It's clear in these few verses, Jacob's more spiritually enlightened than would seem from reading the last few chapters. He clearly here acknowledges the hand of God and the good favour of God in his life. God had transferred a large portion of the increases in Laban's flock over to Jacob. Though notice, he still says the God of my father, not simply my God. He still seems reluctant to fully claim a more personal and direct relationship with Yahweh. Verse 10, And it happened, at the time of the flocks conceived, that I lifted my eyes and saw in a dream, and behold, the rams which leaped upon the flocks were streaked, speckled, and grey-spotted. Then the angel of God spoke to me in a dream, saying, Jacob. And I said, Here I am. And he said, Lift your eyes now and see all the rams which leap upon the flocks are streaked, speckled, and grey-spotted. For I have seen all that Laban is doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed the pillar, and where you made a vow to me. Now arise, get out of this land, and return to the land of your family. Given that this is Jacob's account, I still have an inclination towards skepticism. I don't doubt the words Moses records. Jacob certainly told his 2 wives these things. But is everything he's conveying to his wives 100% truth? Or do his words contain a little bit of Jacob embellishment and duplicity? I honestly don't know the answer to this question. The earlier records seem to indicate Jacob carnally plotting to breed the stronger and more desirable ewes with his coloured rams and billies. Sadly, some people become so comfortable with lying and stretching the truth, they can even begin to believe their own nonsense. One thing is clear from this passage: God does direct Jacob to return to Canaan, as we see God intervening on multiple occasions to ensure his safe return to Canaan. Verse 14. Then Rachel and Leah answered and said to him, "Is there still any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? Are we not considered strangers by him? For he has sold us and also completely consumed our money. For all these riches which God has taken from our father are really ours and our children's. Now then, whatever God has said to you, do it." Jacob has the complete backing of his wives, who are greatly aggrieved at their father's treatment of them. Laban's self-centered behaviour has resulted in the loss of respect of his daughters. They know Laban's every action is designed for self-gain. Laban even sold them his daughters for 14 years of Jacob's hard labour, a completely outlandish, over-the-top fee. It's such an ugly way to exist, to only think of yourself. Who wants to be friends with this type of greedy person? A narcissist never really has any true friends. Laban is a classic, unloving, money-grubbing narcissist. Not even his daughters will defend his selfish actions any longer. Verse 17. Then Jacob rose and set his sons and his wives on camels, and he carried away all his livestock and all his possessions which he had gained, his acquired livestock which he had gained in Paddan Aram, to go to his father Isaac in the land of Canaan. Now Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Rachel had stolen the household idols that were her father's. And Jacob stole away, unknown to Laban the Syrian, in that he did not tell him that he intended to flee. So he fled with all that he had. He arose and crossed the river, which is what Hebrew means, river or water crosser, and headed towards the mountains of Gilead. Jacob, the Hebrew, the river crosser, waited for the time of shearing, an opportune distraction. Laban's extended absence opened a window of escape. It's clear by this stage Laban would never have willingly agreed to the departure of Jacob and his family. Laban was using Jacob's sizable family as a leg iron to ensure his continued forced servitude. Jacob was effectively a prisoner to Laban's tyranny. So 97-year-old Jacob surreptitiously departs, true to his nature and a lifetime of plotting and secret scheming. Unbeknown to Jacob, Rachel steals the household idols, the teraphim. Some experts have postulated the teraphim may also have had a title-type claim to land possession. So Rachel was maybe stealing it with the intention of making a claim on her father's land after he passed away. Regardless, the teraphim reveals that whilst the family of Laban was aware of Yahweh and had a knowledge and reverence for him, Yahweh wasn't the exclusive God of the house of Terah, Nahor, and Laban. They practiced polytheism. I've always found it interesting the house of Terah were keepers of teraphim. I personally wonder if teraphim were named after the man Terah, an idol worshipper and an idol maker, since teraphim were household idols. In English, they certainly sound similar, and not that I speak Hebrew, but even when I look at the Hebrew letterings, they're very similar. Most sources I've checked are either silent on the subject or say something like the derivation of Terah and teraphim are both unknown. I've never heard another teacher or scholar make this connection. So on the balance of probability, my wonderings are likely completely wrong. I've heard the reverse connection inferred by other sources saying Terah got his name from his profession, making teraphim. I'd be happy if someone with genuine expertise could shed some light on a possible connection or not between Terah and teraphim. Verse 22. And Laban was told on the third day that Jacob had fled. Then he took his brethren with him and pursued him for 7 days' journey. And he overtook him in the mountains of Gilead. But God had come to Laban the Syrian in a dream by night and said to him, Be careful that you speak to Jacob, neither good nor bad. So Laban overtook Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the mountains, and Laban with his brethren pitched in the mountains of Gilead. Laban is breathing fire. He's a long-lived man, over 150 years of age at this point, so he's no spring chicken. You want to know how angry Laban was? He was so angry, he travelled over 60 kilometres per day for 7 days straight. And how scared was Jacob? He travelled with his family and flocks about 45 kilometres per day for 10 days straight. It's very intriguing. God speaks directly to Laban, this rascal rogue, in a dream at night. So Laban can officially be counted among the Gentile prophets of God. A man of selfish, crooked motives, but a prophet of God. The most infamous of the Gentile prophets of God was Balaam, mentioned 3 times in the New Testament. Balaam, also a money-hungry narcissist, a greedy, coin-chasing, self-centered man. Balaam was apparently from the western Shinar Plain, living near the Euphrates River, according to Numbers 22 and Deuteronomy 23. He was from the same place Laban was from. Balaam may have been a descendant of Laban and Terah, and this is how this Gentile had a knowledge of Yahweh, passed down via Abraham to Terah, to Nahor, then Bethuel, then Laban, and on centuries later to Beor, his name meaning consuming, Beor passing this knowledge to his son Balaam, his name meaning to swallow up the people. Interesting, considering Laban was trying to consume and swallow up Jacob and his family and his heavenly blessings. It's quite a comparison to place Laban and Balaam alongside each other. Both men were Gentile prophets of God. Both were from Padan Aram, western Mesopotamia. Both were sinful men. Both greedy for selfish advancement. Both willing to travel long distances to secure their wealth. Both were warned by God to limit their speech against the family of Jacob, despite their strong desire to do so. Verse 26. And Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done, that you have stolen away unknown to me, and carried away my daughters like captives, taken with the sword? Why did you flee away secretly and steal away from me, and not tell me? For I might have sent you away with joy and songs, with timbrel and harp." I love the way Laban words this. I might have sent you away with joy. Not I would have, I might have. Everyone knew this was a lie. Laban was never willingly allowing Jacob and his family to leave his dominion. Verse 28. And you did not allow me to kiss my sons and my daughters. Now you have done foolishly in so doing. It is in my power to do you harm. But the God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, Be careful that you speak to Jacob, neither good nor bad. And now you have surely gone, because you greatly long for your father's house. But why did you steal my gods? Laban, the prophet of Yahweh, yet he calls Yahweh the God of your father, not his God, not even Jacob's God. This reveals to us Laban isn't a true and exclusive worshipper of Yahweh. Laban seems to have been a polytheist. He probably had a reverence for Yahweh. Yahweh was one of his gods, but he wasn't able to declare Yahweh as his sole God. It's also obvious Jacob wasn't a good witness for serving Yahweh either. The way Jacob had lived these last 20 years showed scant evidence of Jacob's faith in Yahweh either. So here we have Laban, murder in his eyes, chest puffed out, his men menacingly gathered, boasting of his power to harm. Laban's bark is worse than his bite. Yahweh had put a muzzle and a strong leash on Laban's menacing bite. In the end, he ends up looking very weak. Why did you steal my teraphim? 300 miles in 7 days to squeak that accusation out? Verse 31, Then Jacob answered and said to Laban, Because I was afraid, for I said, Perhaps you would take your daughters from me by force. With whomever you find your gods, do not let him live. In the presence of our brethren, identify what I have of yours and take it with you. For Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen them. And Laban went into Jacob's tent, into Leah's tent, and into the 2 maids' tents, but he did not find them. Then he went out of Leah's tent and entered Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the household idols, put them in the camel's saddle, and sat on them. And Laban searched all about the tent, but did not find them. And she said to her father, Let it not displease my lord, that I cannot rise before you, for the manner of women is with me. And he searched, but did not find the household idols. Jacob is certainly not trusting in God at this point. He's terrified of Laban and in fear for his life. He defends his decision to leave in secrecy. Everyone knew Jacob had justifiable reason for doing what he did. If a member of his family had stolen Laban's teraphim, Jacob was willing to sacrifice their life to save his own skin. Jacob is strongly pleading his rightful innocence before Laban, but he's speaking carnally, not acting in faith, and his carnal words endanger the life of his greatly loved wife. Laban's order of search reveals much. It shows who he thought the prime suspects were. It also suggests that Rachel wasn't only Jacob's favourite, but also Laban's favourite. She was the last one he suspected. I think Laban's zeal and rage diminished as he searched each tent, becoming less certain and more sheepish as he came up empty in each tent. Boy, am I going to look silly if I don't find these teraphim. Like all strong Hebrew women, Rachel knew exactly how to deal with a hot-headed man. She used the wrong time of the month ruse to cover her tracks. And Laban, like all guys, instantly wanted nothing to do with that conversation. It goes without saying, of course, this is an ancient 4,000-year-old event, and never since this time has a woman ever used that same excuse to get out of doing something she didn't want to do. I'm sure all the ladies can confirm. Verse 36, Then Jacob was angry and rebuked Laban, and Jacob answered and said to Laban, What is my trespass? What is my sin, that you have so hotly pursued me? Although you have searched all my things, what part of your household things have you found? Set it here before my brethren and your brethren, that they may judge between us both. Jacob now sees the deflation of Laban, his rage-filled eyes now showing defeat. So Jacob goes on the attack. Verse 38, These 20 years I have been with you, your ewes and your female goats have not miscarried their young, and I have not eaten the rams of your flock. That which was torn by beasts, I did not bring to you. I bore the loss of it. You required it from my hand, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. There I was in the day. The drought consumed me, and the frost by night, and my sleep departed from my eyes. Thus I have been in your house 20 years. I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters, and 6 years for your flock. And you have changed my wages 10 times. Unless the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had been with me, surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed. God has seen my affliction and the labour of my hands, and rebuked you last night. Jacob unloads 20 years of stored up injustice, 20 years of protracted enduring with Laban's dishonest dealings. Each point he made with practised precision. Each point a heavy landing blow. Everything Jacob thundered in the hearing of Laban's sons, daughters, grandchildren, and servants rang true. Jacob had publicly and comprehensively exposed the unrighteousness of Laban, and everyone knew it, including Laban. Verse 43, And Laban answered and said to Jacob, These daughters are my daughters, and these children are my children, and this flock is my flock. All that you see is mine. But what can I do this day to these my daughters, or to their children whom they have borne? Now therefore, come, let us make a covenant, you and I, and let it be a witness between you and me. You almost feel sorry for Laban at this point. He's like a deflated party balloon. His righteous indignation is washed away. He's been exposed for the crook he is in front of everyone. And he returns this final, feeble volley, more to cover his broken dignity than any other purpose. These are my daughters, and my grandchildren, and my flocks. Jacob has no need to reply back to Laban. He already knows the greater truth. He sold his daughters to Jacob for 14 years' labour. His grandchildren are Jacob's children. He knows they're more loyal to their father than to him. He knows these former flocks of his are now Jacob's by right of wages for 6 years' work. And to take them from Jacob would impoverish his daughters and grandchildren. So he simply directs for a covenant to be made, or probably better, cut between him and Jacob. Like between God and Abraham back in Genesis 15, the dividing or cutting of animals, a contract signed in blood, in public. Verse 45. So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar. Then Jacob said to his brethren, Gather stones. And they took stones and made a heap, and they ate there on the heap. Laban called it Yegar-Sahadutha, but Jacob called it Galeed. And Laban said, This heap is a witness between you and me this day. Therefore its name was called Galeed. Also Mizpah, because he said, May the Lord watch between you and me when we are absent one from another. If you afflict my daughters, or if you take other wives beside my daughters, although no man is with us, see, God is witness between you and me. After the contract in blood was signed by both men, walking between the animals cut in two, Jacob and his sons gathered stones, setting it up as a pillar, a heap, a pile of stones, a remembrance of this day. They also shared a meal on this heap of stones. Laban called it a heap of witness in his Aramaic dialect. Jacob called it a heap of witness in his Hebrew dialect. It was also called Mizpah, or a place of watch. God would watch over Jacob to ensure he looked after Laban's daughters. In effect, Jacob is promising to care for Laban's daughters, knowing that Laban would never see them again. Verse 51. Then Laban said to Jacob, Here is this heap, and here is this pillar, which I have placed between you and me. This heap is a witness, and this pillar is a witness, that I will not pass beyond this heap to you, and you will not pass beyond this heap and this pillar to me for harm. The God of Abraham, the God of Nahor, and the God of their father judged between us. And Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac. Then Jacob offered a sacrifice on the mountain, and called his brethren to eat bread. And they ate bread, and stayed all night on the mountain. And early in the morning Laban arose, and kissed his sons and daughters, and blessed them. Then Laban departed, and returned to his place. This heap became the marker point of separation between Laban and Jacob. Laban to stay north, Jacob to stay south. Laban invokes the God of Abraham, Nahor, and Terah as the one to judge between Jacob and Laban. This is actually a very sad covenant, confirming a permanent parting of ways. Again, notice, Jacob doesn't swear to this contract by the name of his personal God, but rather he swears by the fear of Isaac's God. Jacob is yet to fully and totally submit to the will and purposes of God. He's yet to hand over his life to God. They eat, sleep the night, and early in the morning, sad old Laban rises, kisses his daughters and grandchildren, blesses them, departs, and never sees any of them ever again. Until our next study, may the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, my God, richly bless you all.